There were more hybrids sold in 2013 than any previous year. Some of the most appealing are hybrid family sedans. So we rounded up 4 of them: the Toyota Camry, Ford Fusion, Volkswagen Jetta, and the newest of the bunch, the Honda Accord. Each were put through an array of vehicle tests and evaluations, including 735 miles of fuel economy testing to find out not only how much each will cost you, but to tell you which is our top pick. I'm joined by Dan Edmunds, our Director of Vehicle Testing, and my fellow editor, Travis Langness. And let's start with the car that came in last, the Toyota Camry Hybrid. To put it simply, it got the worst fuel economy, and it was no better or worse than the other cars in the test.
Which is really surprising because Toyota's been in the game longer than anybody else. I mean, they're practically synonymous with the word hybrid. And so, yeah, it's surprising what a new entry into the marketplace can do with bringing fresh ideas with it.
I think you probably agree with me that it wasn't that it's really bad, it's just sort of didn't really stick out.
Yeah, there's nothing really wrong with the Toyota. It was just bland in comparison. When you drive so many cars like that over such long distances like we did back to back, you realize the small differences between them. And the Toyota is just kind of, you know, there as a car. There's nothing really exciting about it, which is why the other ones eked it out in the long run.
Ironically, it's just sort of beige.
Yeah.
In third place, the Volkswagen Jetta Hybrid. Now, technically, you know, the Jetta is a compact car, but really the back seat, pretty much equally sized as the other two. The trunk's similar, and it's only about $2,000 equally, or when similarly equipped, cheaper than the others here.
Yeah, and I actually fit in it in the driver's seat better than the Camry.
Yeah, so did I. The Jetta's interesting because it doesn't sort of feel as much like a hybrid. It has a turbocharged engine in its hybrid. It made it feel very powerful when we were going up the hills in Death Valley as well as on Interstate
Much
15.
like a regular Jetta, it feels kind of sporty. It feels a little bit more taut and got better turn in on the roads, things like that. So it's, you know, it's closer relationship to a Jetta, and that's why I felt it was a little bit nicer than, a little bit better to drive than the Camry in comparison.
The interesting thing about the Jetta, though, is it came very close to matching the Fusion and the Accord's fuel economy. However, it requires premium fuel.
Yeah, that's a little bit weird when you're trying to save money on fuel to automatically get out of the gate paying 20 cents more a gallon.
But it was still cheaper, ultimately, to fill up than the Camry. And also, it does offer something a little different compared to the other ones, so that's why we put it in third. Next up was the Honda Accord Hybrid. Now, this was surprising because we were really impressed with the Accord, and then another car beat it.
Well, it's laid out a little bit differently than the Ford and the Camry, which share the same basic architecture. It has 2 electric motor generators in there, but it also uses a CVT, a true CVT transmission, and the way it operates is apparent. You know, when the engine is running to generate electricity, you can really hear the RPMs, and so it's much more obvious to the driver that it's doing things, and it doesn't just behave like a regular Accord does.
And I found it disconcerting how there's not a lot of response from the throttle. You know, you just press it down, and maybe there's some vibration.
It doesn't feel like it.
Right, you feel some vibration from the engine, but it's not really corresponding to your movement. It's sort of weird. It draws attention to itself. Otherwise, though, the Accord,
it's a great car.
It's a very impressive
Great car, super comfortable seats.
Yeah.
You know, for a long road trip, I might have chosen this over the Fusion. The Fusion has a little bit better bolstering, but you know, on the long highway grades, you could just really hear that engine noise coming out of the Accord, and you thought, oh, well, it's so comfortable on a road trip, but if I'm going to be on a road trip for that long, that engine noise is going to get a little bit bothersome.
You mentioned it, grades. You know, we have a lot of uphill and downhill on this course and in western United States in general, and the Accord, you know, it really isn't its best environment as far as an NVH standpoint.
And cost is interesting too from the Accord Hybrid because, for instance, you have to get the most expensive Accord Hybrid that's over $35,000 just to get navigation.
Yeah, they bundle navigation with adaptive cruise and some other things that really make navigation more expensive than it would be in some of the other cars.
Absolutely. Well, let's go to our winner of the group, the Ford Fusion Hybrid. Now, it either beat or came very close to the Accord in every single fuel economy test.
Yeah, it was over 50 in the suburban loop, which was amazing.
Yeah, and also it was just it was the most sort of normal feeling to drive. It was very quiet. It's comfortable, and just as icing on the cake, it is the most enjoyable to drive, and it looks great.
Yeah, and it's big. And you would think that would work against it, but it doesn't seem to. And nice driving position. It feels the most like the normal version of the car. You know, it doesn't feel that different from a regular Fusion.
And it's getting the fuel economy of a hybrid without drawing attention to the fact that it's a hybrid. I think
it's something we figured out on those long drives, that for the most part, all four of these cars feel kind of like the same, or, you know, slightly different versions of the base cars that aren't hybrids. So this Fusion felt a lot like a regular Fusion, and I feel like if we put the four cars that were non-hybrid versions of these up against each other, they'd perform relatively similar.
Yeah, the finishing order might have been the same.
Yeah. But let's talk about in terms of cost. Now, all of these cars did, you know, there's fuel economy differences in terms of MPG. But when you think about it in terms of gallons per mile, gallons being the amount of gas and the amount of money you are spending. So talk about
well, as I've said before, you know, miles per gallon isn't really the best unit, although we're stuck with it. And the reason for that is the value of a mile per gallon up here between 50, 51, 48 isn't that much in terms of money out of your pocket. You know, on the other end of the spectrum, down at the pickup truck end, the difference between 14 and 15 is huge. But the difference between 47 and 48 is pretty small.
So really, when you look at it, the difference between the best performing car and the worst performing car was $6 over the course of the entire test.
Which was how many miles?
Which is 735 miles.
That's not a lot. I mean, it'll add up to $100 or so over a year. $100 is a couple of dinners.
So really what it boils down to is all those other elements that would make you choose one car over another. And in this test, we would choose the Ford Fusion Hybrid.